Hello, my name is Peter Levi, and I write and, God help me, edit um, the site MCU and Comics. And I've been meaning to post vlogs along with written content for quite some time, but through a lack of the technical means to do so, even semi-competently, we've held off until now. As you can see, I'm still roughing it. We just got a webcam, and I'm using a mic that's intended for a headset because that's what's available. And we also have other sounds going on, but hopefully the ambient noise isn't too much. So the purpose of this is to kind of go through the material that is posted up in the articles, because people don't have as much time to read, and content like this, be it audio or video, is a lot easier to absorb. And it's a bit more of a conversation this way, even though we don't have the luxury of editing things to make sure our meaning is clear and we're not misspeaking. But we'll just hope that there's not too much confusion here. So I know the latest episode of WandaVision dropped just the other day. I'm not discussing that now. Instead, I'm going to go through the news I dropped just the day before, and because I'm still sort of processing and writing about the WandaVision episode, so we won't specifically touch on that. Instead, we'll touch on other news. So the first thing that came out, and for me was the most interesting and sort of interesting set of news, is something that has not been talked about at all by anyone, from what I can tell, and that is the report about the Eternals, and specifically Gemma Chan. And I should say, if I mispronounce anyone's name, my apologies. But we had I believe he's the editor of GWW, Casey Walsh, put out in a tweet, and I'll actually read the quote verbatim here. I heard Gemma Chan was a pain to work with on Eternals, so much so Feige reduced her role in future plans and changed the ending to give Madden, Icarus, a larger role. So he put this out, and after, I don't know if it was a couple hours, a fairly short amount of time, he deleted the tweet. However, he left up other social media posts that had similar content, just not quite as explicit. And the thing about Walsh is he is not the kind of person to make this sort of thing up. He, if you know anything about him, and I mean, how well do we know these people, but given what he puts out there, she's the kind of actress that he would be very much in support of. So he's not someone who would be inclined to make this up. How is he as a source of information? If you had asked me a year ago, I would have said he's not particularly well known in that respect. He and former writers at GWW would get their info from Daniel RPK, who gets a lot of his stuff from Production Weekly. And he specifically didn't usually post much of anything in terms of articles on his own site. But over the last 6 months for sure, maybe a little longer than that, he has posted stuff that's proven to be credible. And because of that, we can't just dismiss what he says because he has no track record. He does have a track record. It's not extensive. He's certainly not in Roger Wardell territory, but he's someone that you have to consider when they say something, especially when it's something this dramatic. So is he credible? We certainly have to consider what he says. Is this the sort of thing he would just put out there? No. He's very much a MCU fanboy, as are all the scoopers, really. I think you kind of have to get that access. And so whether it's true or not, certainly he believes it is, and his source presumably believes it is as well. So why did the post go away, and why is no one talking about it? Well, I think the post went away because his buddies, and the scooper community is very, very small. His buddies, I'm sure, told him to take it down. The problem with putting stuff like that out is you risk your access, right? So, no, I don't know what level of access he has, but you're risking your source as well. But if you piss people off that are associated with that, they're just not going to talk to you. So I think for that reason he took it down. But the reason I think he genuinely believes it, besides posting it, is he's left other things up that are quite related to that. So clearly he believes it. Now, so I think, so in terms of the other coverage, so I get back my train of thought, why hasn't anyone else talked about this? It's mostly for the same reason. It's mostly for access reasons. Why risk offending sources, getting sources in trouble? Why, or any privileges you might get from people within Marvel themselves by posting something like this, even if it's true? There's no benefit to doing it. While these people have a tendency to generate drama, their content is often not really dramatic. They're not like outrage YouTubers, the sort of thing you see around Star Wars particularly. So I believe that's why it's disappeared. But just because it has disappeared, I don't think makes it any less plausible. So how will we verify it? I don't think we ever will, and I'll go over that, or at least if we do, it'll be years later. So when the MCU decided to do the Eternals, it was a pretty big surprise. That's Jeremy Conrad's claim to fame, was scooping that. For those who don't know, the Eternals, the IP was at ABC for years. I think it was John Ridley was attached to it. I might be misremembering the name, but anyway, secret project for ABC for years and years and years. And then suddenly Kevin Feige swooped in and said, no, that's for the MCU. I'll have that back now. And, so why was that? I've assumed that it's because Warner Brothers was going to make New Gods. And for those who don't know, Jack Kirby invented both New Gods at DC and the Eternals at Marvel, and they're very, very similar, quite intentionally. If I remember correctly, Kirby never got a chance to finish his arc with New Gods at DC, so he could essentially take another stab at it with Marvel. And I've often thought that Feige likes to get ahead of these things that are coming out. Competition from Warner Brothers. And I won't go down that rabbit hole, but I think that's the real impetus, because the Eternals is a very obscure IP. People sort of casually throw around the Guardians tag, pardon me, when they discuss it, but in relative terms, Guardians is much more popular than Eternals. Eternals is a very deep, deep cut. So you're not producing that with any expectation that there was going to be a significant number of comic book fans who are going to be excited about it. But what was interesting is they decided to lean the film on two actors who have no track record of being able to support a film like this. So that's Gemma Chan and Kit Harington. And Harington is certainly the more famous of the two because of his role in Game of Thrones. But all the films he's made have bombed, right? So you've got a name, a recognizable actor from a popular IP in Game of Thrones. That kind of makes sense. But Gemma Chan, outside of Crazy Rich Asians, which had very modest box office, like very modest, we're talking smaller than the Ed Norton Incredible Hulk. It's very, very modest. It wasn't an expensive movie, so it made money, but it's not blockbuster material. So you're taking those two actors, and what you're hoping is that they can have a Chris Pratt-like evolution, that they can, at least within the MCU, maybe Chris Hemsworth's a better comparison because he's struggled outside of that. But you're hoping that they can do something that they haven't been able to do on their own. But you can see that Marvel was not going to, just like with Chris Pratt, they weren't going to put all their eggs in one basket. So Eternals has the biggest supporting cast of any Marvel film. And it includes people who have not really blockbuster pass, but a lot of recognizable names, so that the whole project does not rest upon these two unknowns in terms of this sort of film. So it was a big risk, but a risk with a lot of mitigating circumstances. And that's important because let's say that Walsh's report is true, that she caused problems on set and Marvel wants to move away from her. Well, it's an ensemble cast, so it's incredibly easy to shift focus to another character. According to Walsh, it's Madden's Icarus. Very easy to do. And in terms of future, for those who don't know, Cersei is the most popular Eternals character in relative terms in the comics, but she's not that popular. She can't support her own comic. She cannot. You don't bring her in to lift the profile of your comic. She's just around. And so shifting the focus away from her is also very easy. The key character from the Eternals is Black Knight. And he's not associated with that at all. He's his own IP. Making him work is much more important than any of the other Eternals characters. So all that being said, I was curious to see after this came out if there would be any resonance. I have not seen any. Nobody's talking about it at all except me, as far as I can tell. And I don't think we'll hear about it again. And we'll just have to judge what happens with Chan down the line. But I will say I think the odds are that this is true, and that's interesting. But I don't think whatever drama is there is going to impact the quality of the movie. Speaking of, a little before this came out, I started seeing all sorts of chatter about how the Eternals was going to be the greatest MCU film we've seen. Some people talked about it like it was going to be one of the great movies ever made, and this was very peculiar. Outside of some promotional stuff, there's no trailers. There's barely any set photos, so how can anyone know? And it turns out that all of this comes from a tweet from a guy by the name of Eric Weber, who, among other things, is editor-in-chief of of Awards Ace, whatever that is. And he put out a tweet where he said he got a text from a high-level source who said that Chloe Zhao crushed the Eternals, and Marvel is almost in disbelief about what they have on their hands. That's very, very high praise. So, is Weber a known scooper? No, he's somebody in the industry. Would he put this out to hype the film? That's possible, but I don't know that he would. So I think we can say that this is probably credible. However, the reason why I don't think much of this, and other people like John Campea and Robert Meyer Burnett thought this was actually kind of funny, is this sort of hyperbole is pretty common. It's part of marketing. There's that infamous story about how Warner Brothers gave Batman v Superman a standing ovation when they saw it before it came out. So just because people inside are saying something is great, we can't really, it's honestly almost meaningless. It's better than the alternative, but that's really about it. So, to me, until we see a trailer, we can't really start judging it. But that's sort of, it's kind of nice to have eternal news of some sort, because there's been almost nothing about that film for so long. Admittedly, in part because it's not coming out anytime soon. I'm not going to talk too much about WandaVision other than to say the Reddit leak that came out the day before was 100% accurate. That doesn't happen very often. So Spider-Man 3. We had Tom Holland talking, as he likes to do. And in one of his comments, he indicated that intimated is a better word, intimated that Sony and Marvel, or specifically Disney, had re-upped their deal. We can't take that at face value. We have had hints about that before. Mikey Sutton has certainly done that. I think there might have been somebody else as well. Oh, Olivia Wilde, the director of Spider-Woman, has sort of hinted that way. I think it's probable, but Tom Holland saying something, I don't think we can do much with that. Positive sign, I think, is about the best you can do, and just wait for something a little more meaty than that. We did have one other Spider-Man related thing that came out through some guy on Reddit. He knows a guy. They always know a guy. And he said that Spider-Punk and Spider-Man 2099 will appear in the film. Now, I'd never heard of Spider-Punk, barely heard of Spider-Man 2099, but normally when these things pop up on Reddit, mods will ask for confirmation. And if they can get it, they'll leave it up, and if not, it goes away. In this case, he couldn't offer confirmation, but they left it up anyway. Given how crowded this film is, I find this very implausible. And even if it's not, I don't care. I'm admittedly not a very big Spider-Man guy, but that to me is just, what could you do? How much time would you have with them? 20 seconds? Yeah. So I don't think it's likely, but if you see them, it's just cameos. Interesting stuff from Feige on Blade. When he was talking about films, he mentioned that only Deadpool 3 of the stuff that was currently in process was going to be R-rated, meaning that Blade will be PG. And quite a few people were surprised by this, but I was not. I think a lot of people forget that Deadpool 3 was thrust upon Feige by Bob Iger. Bob Iger just couldn't shut up about it, about how he was going to have that film, it was going to be R-rated, it was going to be Ryan Reynolds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was part of his pitch to buy Fox. So Feige was locked into that reality. I never thought he really had much of an inclination to make R-rated movies. Why bother? While they can make a lot of money, you're far more likely to make less because the whole family can't go, and the MCU is about the whole family being able to go. The other thing too is the source material. The comics themselves are almost always PG anyway. So you can do those iconic stories. You can even do The Punisher and not break a PG rating, especially not in the US. The US violence is pretty much a free-for-all. It's just nudity and swearing to get Americans excited. So this was not a surprise to me. The only sort of meaningful element to it, I guess, is, haven't we had scoops that said, hey, Blade is going to be R-rated? Yes. A couple months ago, I think December, Mikey Sutton had said, yes, Blade was going to be R-rated and lead into a number of R-rated Supernatural shows. He's deleted that since. He's been refurbing his website. I don't know if that one will ever come back. But so in that case, it seems to be debunked that is not happening, that was not the plan, and we'll get a PG Blade. I personally think that's fine. You can do a perfectly fine Blade without the R rating. People forget that the Wesley Snipes films were not specifically big box office, modest success before they went away. So not a surprise. I'm not disappointed. Just interesting to know, and means that outside of Deadpool, nothing in the future is on that scale. Another thing I talked about briefly, and this may be obvious to some of you, but why the multiverse? Why go that way? Outside the fact that DC is probably doing that too. So again, you can sort of jump ahead of them by doing it. I think one of the main things is it's a get out of jail free card. If you want to bring in, as indeed they seem to be doing, Charlie Cox, because you like his version of Daredevil or just like Cox as the actor, you can now do that without being burdened by the messy Netflix continuity. If you want to bring back a dead character because maybe you made a mistake and shouldn't have killed them off, Loki, or you didn't like the actor in that role, but you like that role, so you want to recast. Multiverse is perfect for that. Pardon me. So I think that is one of the main reasons behind doing it, and it leaves that option for you forever. So you have a way to undo errors in terms of casting a character through the multiverse whenever you want. And the only danger in that is you don't want to abuse it too much. If you completely remove stakes, even from something that's comic based and like this, people will lose interest if they think nothing matters. So that's the tricky part with that. I think that's the main reason we're not getting the Aaron Taylor Johnson Quicksilver. Beyond the fact that he wasn't received as well as the Evan Peters one, you want to at least leave certain benchmarks where a character, something happens to them and that remains permanent. Because that just adds weight to events. That's what you want. So the next thing, Edward Lauder, I think that's how you say his name, from Small Screen. He was talking shop with Tim from Lords of the Long Box, and they were mostly just chatting. There weren't significant scoops, but Edward did repeat two things he said before. One is that he believes there will be a Captain America 4, and Chris Evans will be in it, and that's why Marvel is renegotiating with him. We're not negotiating with him. I think that's possible, but I don't think Evans would be Captain America in it. This may play into Charles Murphy's scoop a while back about a Nomad series or film floating around at Marvel. The thing is, a Captain America 4 wouldn't be anytime soon. So there's no urgency to sign Evans if you're doing that. At least not for that. The other thing he repeated was that Ultron would have something to do with Hayward in WandaVision. And since we're down to the final episode of WandaVision, I think that's very unlikely. There isn't really room in the 50 minutes or so, which less credits and whatnot is going to be just over 40 minutes in the final episode for that kind of reveal. To what end, right? Ultron's not going to be the new next big bad. You know, the MCU's already dealt with him. Now, keep in mind, Lauder and Sutton as well, and some others believe there's a secret 10th episode. The next episode will not be the last one. But that aside, I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we're going to see an Ultron moment. I wouldn't dismiss some sort of allusion to him, but we've already had that, so, you know, I don't think there's much to that. All right, so our final thing from the post I put up on Thursday is about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And here we're going to go over this persistent rumor from Sutton and why I don't believe it in the way he's framed it. And we'll make it clear, too, he's not being disingenuous. He absolutely believes this, absolutely thinks that the evidence he has supports his claim. So this isn't a hoodwink. This isn't clickbait. This is just where he and I are looking at the same things and coming to different conclusions, and that's fine. Part of being a fan is you have opinions, and sometimes you don't come to the same place. So let's look at what this is about. So Feige made a bunch of comments a couple of days ago, and some of those struck Sutton as proving his claim that we are getting some of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s characters back, with the show being keeping its continuity within the MCU. That's the key thing, so that the show will be core MCU. All of it happened in the Prime Universe. That's his argument. So here's what Feige said. There's two direct quotes and one paraphrase. He and I are both using the same source for where this comes from. So the first quote, I think there are legions of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans and Daredevil fans and Jessica Jones fans and Luke Cage fans. There's a very big fan base for those shows, end quote. We'll get into that in a second. The paraphrase, Feige indicates that some of the stories you see about characters they can use again from the previous TV shows are true. Some are not, but they will be open to opportunities depending on the scenario. So let's unpack that a bit. So some of the stories you see about characters they can use again, that's important, characters they can use again, that only applies to Netflix and Fox. The ABC, Hulu, I don't think were any on FX? I can't remember where Cloak and Dagger was. Those shows, so Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., The Runaways, Cloak and Dagger, and Hellstrom. All those characters they could use whenever they wanted, no matter what. There was no delay, there was no impediment to using them. So he's only referencing Netflix characters who were on a 2-year delay after they were canceled. All of them are back now. And the Fox characters who, until the sale was completed, they could not touch for obvious reasons. So